All right, so the game I want to share today is a game that I played on an airplane. I took a direct flight from Chicago to Dubai. It was a 13-hour flight, actually en route to photograph at the FIDE World Championship. And on the plane, I discovered that in the built-in entertainment system in front of my seat, there is a game called Kasparov Chessmate, in which you can play an AI version of the one and only Garry Kasparov. Now, it allowed me to select the difficulty of my opponent, but it only allowed me to select up until 2300. So I didn't really get the real deal of the 2850 Garry Kasparov. But 2300, especially for an AI, it's still a level that can be difficult to beat. And we went ahead and started a game. And as we're going to see, the game features a Stafford Gambit, but it also just features a really, really fun tactical attacking sequence that I think all of you are going to enjoy. So before we get into the game, I do want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's video, which is Audible. Now, when I'm on a plane and I'm not defeating Kasparov bot with the Stafford Gambit, I do really enjoy listening to audiobooks, and Audible is my go-to platform to do that. They have a huge variety of genres, from comedy to nonfiction to fiction, sci-fi, romance, whatever you're into, any sort of spoken word entertainment you can find on Audible. And let me give a sneak peek into my personal audio library and just share some of the titles that I've been enjoying in recent weeks and months. And one audiobook that I do want to highlight is a new release, is Chess Queens by Jennifer Shahade. And this is an audiobook that I am in the process of listening to, and I've really, really been enjoying so far. It highlights some of the triumphs and struggles of women in chess and talks a lot about some of the notable inspiration and success stories, including the Polgar sisters and Pia Kramling, and some of the early pioneers in chess, like Sonia Graf and Vera Menchuk. And I do have to say, Jennifer Shahade does an amazing job narrating the book and providing some really nice insights that I would not have been aware of otherwise. So if you would like to try out Audible for free and listen to any audiobook of your choice, click the link in the description, audible.com/IamRosen, or text I am Rosen to 500 500. You can listen to Chess Queens or any other audiobook of your choice. And I really hope Audible brings as much value to you as it's brought to me. And with that, let's get back to the chess. So the game started, Garry played e4, and even though this is a bot representation of Garry Kasparov, I'll just be referring to him as Garry. And I responded with e5. It was my goal to enter a Stafford Gambit. And to my dismay, Garry did not take the pawn on e5, but rather played knight to c3. And I was a little bit disappointed here, but I really insisted that we enter a Stafford. And if you do want a Stafford from this position, the move to play is bishop to c5. And this is considered a dubious move because you are gambiting a pawn, but it's only way to attempt to transpose back into the Stafford. The alternative is knight to c6, which is a bit more symmetrical, can lead to either a 4-knight Scotch or 4 knights mainline. But after I played bishop c5, we did transpose back into the Stafford Gambit after takes and knight to c6. And I actually had this position against Magnus Carlsen, real life Magnus Carlsen, in a titled arena over a year ago. And Magnus played knight f3 here, which is a very sensible move. And the game continued d5, takes, and then d4. And after bishop b4, bishop d2, the game continued. I'll leave a link to that video if you want to check it out. But I will say that Magnus did handle the opening and the middle game quite well. So we did not enter this line in this game, but rather after knight c6, Garry took on c6, and I took back with the pawn. It's as if we just entered a Stafford normally. It's usually black who had just played bishop c5 here, but this is a direct transposition. And for the Stafford Gambit aficionados out there, you'll know the main move for white and the supposed refutation is pawn to h3, which is recommended by a lot of other like coaches and chess YouTubers as just a safe way to meet the Stafford because it prevents knight g4. And I'll admit that, yeah, black does have some issues in this line. There's been a number of moves I tried here between h5 and g5 and b5. And there's still room to try and muddy the waters. But white is objectively doing quite well here if they don't fall into any trickiness. But instead of playing h3, in this game, we see bishop to e2, which is also a very sensible move. But this move is prone to some really nasty traps. And the move I play here is pawn h5. Now, the alternative instead of h5 is to play queen to d4. But as we'll see, sometimes these lines transpose. And the point of pawn h5 is to support the g4 square, to basically prepare knight g4 next and get multiple pieces attacking on the king side. Now, from here, I will say the best move for white is to play pawn d3, which was not played in this game. But the point of pawn d3 is to quickly develop the bishop, and if I play knight g4, white can take, and play bishop e3. And this is a position I've had countless times before. Actually, I'm checking my stats here on Lichess. I've had this position 25 times. And I've scored pretty well even here, despite the fact the engine will say white's a bit better. After the move queen to d6, black has some kind of nagging pressure against the pawn on h2. And there's potential tactics where if white plays g3, black can take and win back the pawn and go into some endgame. But I don't want to go on too much of a tangent because instead of d3, white in this game castled kingside, which is a really risky move. And sometimes you'll see this in engine chess, is the engine will play a move without fear, but sometimes it's just a matter of not calculating far enough. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened to my AI opponent in this game, is white took a little bit too many risks and then just reached a point of no return. So I continue here, knight g4, threatening the very deadly queen to h4 to attack both f2 and h2. And white plays a very logical move, pawn h3, just trying to kick away the knight and make it so queen h4 isn't as powerful. But in this position, black has a really, really nice move that I'll just go ahead and show, is queen to d4. And what this does is it puts a third attacker on f2. And this is also still opening preparation from my side. I usually get this position from a slightly different move order. It usually happens if white plays h3 first, then after queen d4, castling knight g4, this would be a direct transposition. And if we take a look at what's going on here, there's not too many ways for white to effectively defend f2. And in this game, Garry took on g4, which at first it looks like white's surviving, but if we calculate a little bit further, you'll see that white's just completely toast. Now, the best move, according to the engine, is bishop takes g4, after which black just has a raging attack with now the pawn, the bishop, the rook, all aimed towards h3, combined with this battery, and engine gives a decisive advantage to black in this position. So what happened in the game is after bishop takes g4 was played. Now, I do want to show a really cool line, which has probably been featured in some of my other Stafford Gambit videos, but it's a line that just never gets old. And it involves another piece sacrifice from black after white plays probably what's the best try, is g3, attempting to play king g2 and rook h1. Black just has a really beautiful sequence after queen e5, king g2. This is black to move and find the only winning move. Now, I guess I gave some sort of clue that it does involve another piece sacrifice. But if you haven't seen this before and you don't see it already, feel free to pause the video and find the absolutely crushing move for black in this position. And the dog is barking. Maybe the dog finds it too. So congratulations if you found the move. Bishop takes f2, just blowing up the entire kingside for white. And the point is if rook takes f2, then there's queen h5, and there's just no stopping the threats along the h-file. Black is threatening queen h3, king g1, and queen h1 mates. And if king takes f2, this leads to a really funny line. Rook h2 check, king e3, queen takes g3, king d4, and then bishop to e6. And even though black is down 2 pieces, black is ready to castle queenside with check. And it's usually not a good sign when your king is the most developed piece in the opening and queens are still on the board. So I was a little bit disappointed this position did not occur, but what we're going to see is also pretty savage. Going back, pawn takes pawn, and bishop takes pawn was played. And here there's a very simple and nice move for black. Queen to e5, very simply threatening checkmate in 1. And there's very, very few ways for white to defend against this threat. And already it seemed like the computer was just trying to delay the game as much as possible. Bishop h3 was played. I happily took the bishop. And then after pawn d4, I took the pawn. Now we see queen to f3. So white trying to put up a little bit of resistance, but after a nice move, bishop to g4, I can say, oh no, my bishop. And if white takes it, then there's checkmate on h2. So bishop g4 has a nice threat of hitting the queen and also threatening mate. So for that reason, queen f4 is played, but this doesn't slow down my initiative. I simply slide over to the h-file, queen h5, threatening mate on h1. And the only move to keep the game going for a bit longer is to play the very desperate queen to h6, obstructing my queen-rook battery. This is a very telltale sign of playing an engine where it just chucks pieces, trying to prolong the mate for as long as possible. So if we zoom forward here, I took the queen, and after rook to e1, I now leverage the half-open g-file. And for some reason, the rook moved back to f1, and I think robot Garry was beginning to tilt a little bit and just show its emotions by moving its rook back and forth. I went in for bishop to f3, and I really thought I was going to be mating on the very next move, but white prolonged the game for a couple more moves after bishop g5. I took the bishop, rook e1, I took the pawn, king f1, and queen to h1 checkmate. I defeated Kasparov bot in just 20 moves with black and with the Stafford Gambit. It was a very feel-good game. Now, for those of you who might be doubting that this game actually happened, I do have video proof, which I think I'll just speed up and share above my head. So if you want to watch at like 25% speed, you can see the game unfold. But I hope you enjoyed this game, and I hope this gives inspiration for taking down not only robot grandmasters, but maybe even real grandmasters too. So with that, let me know if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.